hiss. The heavy pressure seals of the isolation cradle locked into place. Outside the viewport, there was only the endless darkness of deep space. Inside, the Kethrani Dominion's ultimate punishment awaited. The monitoring collective watched the live visual feed from Sector 4. They documented every twitch. They waited for the screams. The pale sovereign sat in the center of the reinforced room. She was an unstable weapon. A monster forged by the Empire, then discarded into this cage when she began to ask questions. Every previous subject bonded to her had died, or gone mad. Now, it was the human's turn. Marcus Hale stepped into the room. He did not tremble. He did not drop to his knees in terror. He carried a small, faded canvas travel bag. He walked to the primary structural table. He set the bag down with a soft thud. Yet it was a mundane act of settling in. He was marking the prison as a living space. He didn't beg. What happens to an empire built on fear when the condemned simply unpacks his clothes? Marcus looked up. A misaligned thermal vent in the ceiling plating was vibrating. It produced a sharp, irritating, metallic buzz. He reached up, tapped the corner of the grate with his knuckles, and the noise stopped. Complete silence followed. Then, he looked at the most dangerous being in the galaxy. "Hello," Marcus said. His voice was perfectly calm. In the observation bunker, Senior Monitor Valix stared at the telemetry. The biological bond initiated the moment the airlock sealed. Standard protocol dictated immediate degradation. The human's neural pathways should have been burning under the psychic pressure. So Valix prepared to log a catastrophic neurological event. He closed his mouth. The thought evaporated entirely. The biometric streams on the primary console shifted. The jagged, chaotic red lines of the Sovereign's output suddenly smoothed out. They transitioned into a deep rhythmic blue. Stability. It was a statistical impossibility. The raw energy of the Sindari warrior was not consuming the fragile human architecture. The readings indicated a symbiotic equilibrium. The human was acting as a grounding rod. Days cycled into weeks. The monitoring collective compiled reports that defied Kethrani scientific doctrine. They watched Marcus Hale cook simple meals. They logged audio of him asking the Pale Sovereign if she preferred her rations heated. They recorded his casual, entirely unforced posture. And he moved around her not as a chosen victim, but as a companion, not a prisoner, a roommate. The weapon was reacting. Seraphine did not strike him. The visual feeds showed her tracking his movements. The algorithm flagged her micro-expressions as high-level curiosity. She had watched soldiers break and leaders beg for their lives. She had never been offered half a portion of synthetic protein with a polite question. Valix reviewed the daily aggregates. His subdermal carapace plating locked rigid against his spine. His internal thermal regulation failed, plunging his core temperature to a frigid crawl. This was not a survival mechanism. The human was not surviving by avoiding her. He was surviving by understanding her. Because the data did not lie. Whispers spread through the encrypted comm channels of the Supreme Conclave. The rumors leaked from the observation bunker. The Dominion ruled thousands of star systems through absolute terror. Fear was their currency, yet here was a human who simply refused to spend it. The bond grew stronger. The telemetry showed the Sovereign's previously volatile energy matrix crystallizing. She was being awakened, not as a tool of the Empire, but as an autonomous entity. The cage was no longer functioning as isolation. It was becoming a sanctuary. The Conclave realized the catastrophic danger. A broken, unstable Sindari was a localized threat. A fully stabilized Sindari warrior, anchoring her terrifying power to a human whose emotional capacity she resonated with instead of the empire that built her, possessed the raw kinetic potential to shatter the entire Kathrani dominion overnight. Hope was a contagion, and it had to be excised. Orders descended from the high command. The experiment was terminated. The human had to be erased before the stability became permanent. 4 elite Kathrani assassins breached the outer airlock of the isolation cradle. Valix watched the feed. The monitoring collective held its collective breath. The execution squad moved with perfect lethal synchrony down the primary corridor. Inside the living quarters, Marcus was wiping down the food preparation counter. Seraphine was sitting on the floor, watching him. The proximity alarms did not trigger. The assassins possessed dampening fields that rendered them invisible to internal sensors. They phased through the reinforced door seals. The feed spiked. The assassins moved like ghosts. They were shadows made of sharpened steel and Kathrani malice. Audion leveled a disruptor at Marcus's back. The human was still holding a cleaning cloth. He didn't even turn around. Seraphine did. She didn't just move. She arrived. One moment she was sitting, the next, she was a blur of silver and incandescent blue. Her combat instincts had always been the Dominion's pride, but this was different. She wasn't fighting for an empire. She was fighting for the man who asked her about the temperature of her soup. She caught the first assassin's throat. His armored plating didn't just crack, it pulverized under her grip. She pivoted, her bioluminescent markings flaring a violent, blinding white that the monitoring cameras couldn't process. A weapon blast scorched toward Marcus. Seraphine stepped into it. The bolt dissipated against her skin. She didn't flinch, and she tore through the remaining 3 with a efficiency that was both beautiful and terrifying to behold. In the observation bunker, Valix tried to coordinate a security response. No. He simply watched the screen with a numb, hollow realization that the cage was gone. "We have to go," Seraphine said. Her voice was steady. It was the first time the monitors had heard her speak in cycles. Marcus didn't panic. He grabbed the small travel bag from the table. It was the same bag, now stuffed with 2 ration packs and a portable heater, a humble anchor of normalcy in the middle of a celestial execution. They reached the docking bay. They took a patrol ship. They vanished into the asteroid belt. The Dominion did not let them go. The flagship, Obsidian Fang, led a fleet of thousands. They emerged from hyperspace like a wall of obsidian needles, and surrounding the tiny stolen craft. There was no escape. No human trick could save them from 10,000 targeting locks. Marcus stopped the ship. He looked at Seraphine. She was glowing, not with the frantic, jagged light of a broken weapon, but with the soft, infinite radiance of a sun. "Stay close," she whispered. She closed her eyes. The entire Imperial fleet waited for the order to fire. On the bridge of the Obsidian Fang, the Admiral assumed this was a final desperate surge of energy. Wait. He saw the sensors recalibrating as the energy signature didn't explode outward in a sphere of destruction, but moved in a perfectly synchronized, sentient wave of harmonic resonance that bypassed the ship's hulls to target only their power cores. The wave hit. 10,000 warships went dark. Gravity failed. Our life support shifted to emergency reserves. In the cockpit of the patrol ship, a single half-empty silver ration packet floated upward, spinning slowly in the weightless air. Seraphine opened her eyes. She looked at Marcus. He reached out and caught the floating packet, then looked at the screen. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy was drifting, helpless, because a human had decided that a monster was worth a hello. The whispers began immediately. They traveled faster than the ship. Every species in the Dominion heard the story. It wasn't just a report of a battle. It was a fundamental shift in the galaxy's understanding of what power looked like. They had spent eons fearing the Kathrani because the Kathrani were the strongest, yet they had just been dismantled by a species that was supposedly weak, soft, and driven by useless emotions like empathy. The rumors were a fire. You could not arrest a rumor. You could not execute a whisper. Across 1,000 worlds, beings looked at their human neighbors. They didn't see new targets. They saw the race that had stood beside the Pale Sovereign and walked away with a travel bag and a partner. The Dominion's walls were still standing, but the foundation of fear had turned to sand. Marcus set the ship to a new course. The stars ahead were no longer a cold, endless darkness, but a series of lights waiting to be seen by two people who had found a way to bridge the impossible gap between their souls. He looked at her. She wasn't a weapon anymore. A single small ship moved through the graveyard of an empire, carrying the only two beings in the universe who knew that the greatest force in existence wasn't a fleet of warships or a psychic blast, but the quiet, stubborn refusal of a human heart to be afraid of something it was told to hate. The silence of the belt was absolute. It was the sound of a galaxy beginning to breathe for the first time in 1,000 years.